Hello and welcome. My name is Lars Egeland. I'm director of the library at Oslo Metropolitan University in Norway. I'm also member of the IATOL board, and I'm very pleased to join you today in this session. And as you know, now starts the real hybrid conference, not only with remote participants, but also with remote speakers. So before we begin, I will say that we appreciate your patience and understanding that the staff here is bringing the conference to both in-person and virtual attendees. And the staff is working hard to make it a seamless experience for all. This session is being transmitted via Zoom through PDLOP. And the speakers and presenters will have their turn presenting. And at the end of the 3 presentations, we will begin the Q&A. Those viewing through PDLOP, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will have our in-person PDLOP moderator ask your question on your behalf. Our first presentation is from Canada. It's Heather Cunningham and Christina Kim from University of Toronto. And the title of their presentation is Weaving Open Dialogue Using Canada's Open Science Roadmap Framework. Heather Cunningham is Assistant Director for Research and Innovation Services at the Gerstein Science Information Center at the University of Toronto. She has a Master of Science in Genetics, as well as a MLIS from McGill University. She has been a professional librarian at the University of Toronto for over 20 years and has been involved in a number of initiatives. Christina Kim is the liaison librarian at the Center for Research and Innovation Support, CRIS, at the University of Toronto. The mandate of CRIS is to provide research-centered, practical, and coordinated support to faculty and divisional research offices. She brings over a decade of experience as a University of Toronto librarian and has held a wide variety of roles, including Education and Liaison Librarian to the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, Communication Led, and Entrepreneurship Librarian.
So hello everyone, and welcome to our talk, Weaving Open Dialogue Using Canada's Open Science Roadmap Framework. Heather and I are both speaking to you from Toronto, Canada. So before we begin, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We thank our ancestors, including the Land is Life, for allowing us to be here today. So a little bit about who we are. So my name is Christina Kim, and I'm the liaison librarian for the Center for Research and Innovation Support at the University of Toronto. And I've held a wide variety of roles since starting at U of T in 2011, including education and liaison librarian to the School of Public Health, communications lead, and entrepreneurship librarian. I've also held a cross appointment as senior manager in the Market Intelligence Department at Mars Discovery District.
And good morning, everyone. I am Heather Cunningham, and as I was introduced, I'm the Assistant Director for Research and Innovation Services at Gerstein.
Okay.
And I've been a professional librarian for over 20 years and have been involved in a number of initiatives such as science communication outreach and programming, research services development and realignment, green and sustainable strategies for libraries, as well as open science events, including research metrics and scholarly communications workshops.
Great. This is our agenda for today. We're going to start with a brief overview of the University of Toronto, the University of Toronto Libraries, and the Centre for Research and Innovation Support. Then we'll provide some background on open science in the Canadian context, as well as some thoughts on open science versus open research. We'll then dive into the development of our open science series, which we called Open Science, following the roadmap for research. We'll talk about its launch and the emerging themes, and then end by the challenges and outcomes. So a little bit about the University of Toronto, or U of T. We are a world-leading research-intensive university with 3 campuses in the Greater Toronto Area. U of T is like a small city unto itself, as you can see by the number of students, faculty, and staff. The University of Toronto Libraries, or UTL, is a very large academic library in Canada. It's actually the largest academic library in Canada, and we are the 3rd largest in North America. The system consists of 40 libraries located on 3 university campuses, which supports the teaching and research requirements of over 300 graduate programs, more than 70 professional programs, and about 700 undergraduate degree programs. The Center for Research and Innovation Support, otherwise known as CRIS. So a little bit about CRIS. In recognition of the many exceptional resources currently available to support research and innovation offered through various units or offices across the university, the Center for Research and Support was created in 2019 in partnership with the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation, the libraries, and information technology services. The mandate of CRIS is to provide researcher-centered, practical, and coordinated supports to faculty and divisional research offices. So some background. Open science is hard to define and discuss because it's both an endgame as well as a set of principles and a set of practices. It is not a unified movement with a coherent ideology. There are numerous definitions or variations of definitions from different organizations. But in a nutshell, open science is about making science, as well as the process of doing science, open to all. On February 26, 2020, the federal government of Canada published the Roadmap for Open Science, which provided a plan for greater openness in federal science and activities. It's based on 5 principles: people, transparency, inclusiveness, collaboration, and sustainability. This roadmap was soon overshadowed by the pandemic and the shutdown of the university that happened in March 2020. The pandemic shone a spotlight on the workings of science like never before, and the world got to see how scientific advances happen in real time, the uncertainty inherent in the scientific method. We learned about preprints and peer review, the power of collaborations, and the speed at which discovery can move when incentivized.
So in spring of 2021, the heads of the science libraries at the U of T collaborated to create an open science event that would use the national framework, Roadmap to Open Science, as the structure. So the 5 high-level principles of people, transparency, inclusiveness, collaboration, and sustainability were excellent in that they provided structure as well as breadth to guide discussions on a wide topic. And the 5 principles led to 5 panel discussions. And since the U of T Library is a partner with CRIS, the center, a collaboration with CRIS made sense to encourage the engagement and participation of faculty across the university. So planning started in spring for sessions that were held in November, and all sessions were virtual and synchronous using Zoom. And we wanted to be open, so all sessions were recorded and we made sure the transcripts met accessibility standards. And another important aspect of developing this series of talks focused on the need to have a conversation about open science grounded in the Canadian research landscape, because many of the discussions of open science had been taking place in Europe and the United States. And in a 2021 scoping review published about health sciences librarians' engagement in open science, only 3 of the included studies were from Canadian universities and none of them were from the University of Toronto. So we felt the time was right for a broad discussion that the U of T would lead. And in that scoping review, they also discussed the merits of aligning with national efforts. Therefore, using this federal framework for a Canadian-based discussion was a strength of this planning. And the 2 guiding principles in developing this series of 5 panel discussions were Diversity and inclusivity were core. We were going to build a diverse set of speakers from the ground up and not shoehorn somebody in after the fact to add a bit of diversity. And the second principle was that librarians were going to be part of every panel, either as a speaker or as a moderator, as a declarative statement that librarians have a seat at the table in many or all aspects of open science. We wanted to show this not only to faculty and researchers, but also to librarian colleagues as well. And on this slide, you can see the entire series of panel discussions that were held in November. And in case you are interested in all the speakers across the series, that info is available on the link on the slide, and my colleague Christina has put it into the chat. So I thought it would be interesting to give an overview or a deep dive into one session and the themes that emerged. And it is the Focus on People session, since it was the one that I led. So this was the first session in the series, and we invited Leslie Weir, librarian and archivist of Canada, to be the moderator for the session, since Leslie chaired the Open Science Roadmap Advisory Committee, which informed the federal roadmap for open science publication. And as an interesting side note, Leslie is also the first woman appointed to be librarian and archivist of Canada. So for the panelists, we invited Cassidy Sugimoto, whose research examines the formal and informal ways in which knowledge is produced, disseminated, consumed, and supported, with an emphasis on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tony Ross-Hellauer's research focuses on a range of issues related to open science evaluation and issues of equity in open science. And Leslie Chan's research is in the geopolitics of academic knowledge production and practice on open access and reimagining infrastructure with equity and justice at the core. Now, discussions of open science often discuss outputs and processes and procedures, but often the people are missing, or people are inferred in broad concepts of equity or collaboration, or else in the context that people just need to understand the benefits of open science and then they will be converted. But science is done by and for people, so it was important to have a discussion that had people at the core and discussed real issues that affect real people. And sometimes the fact that people do science gets overlooked and overshadowed. Now, Leslie Chan had an interesting analogy that a journal is like a village, and this village is comprised of researchers, editors, and many others involved in the production and infrastructure which make the journal run. And a journal is also about community, building relationships, acknowledging each other's efforts, and building up each other's knowledge. And all three speakers discussed the stark reality open science does not always lead to an increase in equity. The systemic disparities and barriers caused by gender, race, and ethnicity, which impact education, authorship and citations, obtaining funding, and leadership, are still very much in effect, and therefore impact whose voices get heard and whose voices do not get heard. Who are the decision makers? Which research questions get asked? Who gets funding? And who gets promotions and tenure? And who gets left behind or has to leave academia because of limited opportunities and supports? So COVID put a spotlight on the disparities which already existed within the system. Who is open science open to really? It still seems it is largely in the realm of the rich and the powerful. Open science does not automatically mean an increase in equity, and just making articles and data sets is not, it's a good start, but it's not enough so far. And research and incentives were also discussed as they are strong motivators of behavior. And the current reward system is very object-oriented, counting papers, counting citations, funding amounts, etc. That is because it is messy and hard to reward networks, relationships, ethical behavior, and building a sense of community. And this competition-focused reward system would have to be reframed to one that sees knowledge as relational and not a set of products, and one that is focused around what is good for science, such as openness, diversity, and access to research. And the conversation ended on a high note. So all speakers were in agreement that libraries are completely central to open science, and that librarian roles are multifaceted as researchers, publishers, administrators, and specialists, such as in open science training and research data management expertise. And it was also noted that libraries often do not receive the necessary resources and fundings for their various roles. So this word cloud presents some of the common themes that emerged throughout across all 5 of the panel series. So there were many discussions on equity, inequality, privilege, power, decision makers, accessibility, and intersections with technology, as well as consolidation of the publishing industry.
So I'm going to talk about some of our challenges and outcomes. So for those of you who've organized events, you'll be familiar with some of these challenges. We had lower registration numbers than expected. This could be because November is a busy time of year in academia. Coordinating all of the meetings were challenged because we had to accommodate everyone's schedule in different time zones. Also, I find in my role supporting faculty researchers that faculty tend to want to attend events that provide immediate actionable items. These sessions were more theoretical as opposed to practical. We also had low responses to our feedback survey for each session. So some positive outcomes. Panelists and moderators were very pleased to be invited to speak. We had a high acceptance rate. The only reason a small number declined were due to scheduling conflicts. There was great collaboration and connections that were created, both in putting this series together and afterwards. For example, panelists who didn't know each other prior to being on the same panel worked together in future events. We were excited to collaborate with the Chief Librarian and Archivist of Canada. Another positive outcome was the librarian participation. We didn't have to struggle to get librarians to participate. They were very willing. They felt it was a rightful conversation and space for librarians to be a part of. And we had great conversations that took place during the sessions, with the library central to the conversations, which was one of our objectives that we were able to meet. Library is done by people, science is done by people. So it was important to have librarians front and center embedded in all our conversations. So here are a couple of testimonials from participants. In terms of next steps, we're still thinking about this and we're asking the audience for some ideas, and hopefully you'll share them with us during the Q&A portion. We'd like to acknowledge our Chief Librarian, Larry Alford, for supporting this initiative, as well as our colleagues, the science library heads who were involved in each session and their dedication and hard work in making this series a success. Here are our references. And with that, we'd like to thank all of you for listening to how we wove a discussion of open science into the changing landscape of research. And we look forward to your questions during the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Heather and Christina, and we'll come back to questions. Our second presentation is from the USA, from Florida International University. It's Sao-Hai Jennifer Fu, Levente Juhasz, Jill Krefft, Diana Ter-Ghazaryan, and Boyun Guan. Excuse me for perhaps not pronouncing the names correct. The title is Library-Based Data Curation, Management and Interdisciplinary Research at the Florida International University, Reciprocal Use of Data Through Collaboration. Jennifer Fu is the head of the Geographic Information System Center, the GIS Center, and the Digital Collection Center, DCC, of the Florida International University Libraries. She is responsible for the development, administration, and supervision of GIS technology, implementation campus-wide. She is the PI and co-PI of the 30+ federal, state, and local grants and contracts focusing on geospatial web applications in the areas of sea level rise, transportation planning, security research information, and digital repository systems. She leads efforts in multiple technology grants at the Florida International University to establish the DPanther IT platform to research data management, geospatial data, and computing and digital collections. She earned her Master in Information Science and Policy from State University of New York at Albany. Levente Juhasz earned his PhD in geomatics, focused from the University of Florida. He also holds an MSc in geography from the University of Szeged, Hungary. He's currently a research associate with the GIS Center, and previously he has held short-term visiting appointments at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Italy and at the Carinthia University of Applied Science in Austria. His research revolves around understanding the quality of and the characteristics of user-generated geographical data and the behavior of users in online communication. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Brian. I will not spend too much time introducing myself and my co-presenter, Levente. Rather, I would like to also introduce the other authors in this effort. Jill Krefft is the coordinator of our institutional repository, also the leading professional on our research data management. Diana Ter-Ghazaryan, and she is our research associate, and her role in this initiative is mainly on geospatial data management and curation. Kallenborn Guan is our lead developer, and he is really our technical person for both development and IT configurations. And the projects mentioned are largely implemented by the Florida International University Library's GIS Center, as well as the Digital Collection Center, with the support of many other departments at FIU. Today's outline, I will briefly talk about the research data management practice. And I will then go into the RDM practice at FIU and how that fit into the large data framework and services. And then I will use a funded research project to showcase how our data initiatives and institutional repository initiatives play a role in a applied research project. And Levente is going to discuss the researcher's perspective and experience on the role of data management. And then we'll go to the discussion and conclusion. First, the overview. There are three different types of research data management practice existing from my perspective. The first group is the library-based academic research data management. That, of course, is largely focused on serving students and faculty within the institution and its community. And it's largely influenced by the mandate from federal funding agencies on researchers and their data practice. And it's, of course, largely tied with our academic institutional intellectual property and how we manage them. The second type of practice, in my opinion, happens at a much larger scale, and they're domain-specific data repository, and they're oftentimes discipline-driven. And such examples are in the areas, for example, biocomplexity. You have the knowledge network for biocomplexity, and you have also various NIH-funded medical and health data repositories. And as well as, of course, example would be the criminal justice and forensic science national databases, national archive databases. And these type of domain-specific repository typically involve large network of a specific domain of experts and scientists. And they're not always open to the public, particularly not always open to the public to contribute data. And they're oftentimes tied with government-funded investments in particularly natural, social science, and medical health fields. And the third cluster would be our community and local government data repositories, and typically in conjunction with vendor solutions. A greatest example is the ESRI's data hub. Of course, previously they also had GeoPortal. Although largely focused on geospatial data, but the discipline really covers a wide range. So for these three different types, I will briefly discuss the examples that represents these three different practices. One being Dataverse, the other one is Data One, and the Data Hub. Harvard-developed Dataverse has been the one that has been chosen by many academic libraries as a tool to manage the institutional research data. As we can see, if you look at the lower part of the screen, it reflects a typical academic subject areas. However, if you look at the stats, you notice that there's a real emphasis on arts and humanities, which is kind of missing in the other two clusters of research data management, being demand-based and the government-based, as well as social science, if you look at the last one. So in this sense, the academic research data library practice really, in reality, complement the other two. So another example is the Data One, that is one for the particularly environmental and earth science data repository. And is a large network, as you can see by the stats presented on their website. They have 17 million of data downloads. That goes to show how large the user community really is. And third one is the one that is largely used by government agencies, federal, state, and local agencies, and in conjunction with vendor solution. As you can see, just by browsing the subject area, it is largely supporting government operations and civil services. Although, as I mentioned, largely geospatial in nature, it covers all these different subject areas. So I would also like to discuss a little bit about these three different platforms and how they have in common, how they complement each other, and how they are different. Dataverse, as I mentioned, the Harvard-based one, being that its strong focus is on arts and humanities and social sciences, it really complements the Data One that is largely on science and STEM. And both of these platforms follows various standards of practice, DOI in terms of traceability and interoperability, and standardized metadata creation, and as well as, particularly I want to mention, is controlled vocabulary and thesaurus support. And in this regard, the last one is a little bit lacking. That is the Data Hub, the vendor solution. However, the vendor solution has various data analytic and visualization tools that plays another role in this whole data service that provide. So now I will discuss the practice at Florida International University in terms of research data management. From the conventional literature on this topic, there are various factors that I again summarize into three main ones. One being fiscal, and I would like to discuss how we, as a small, relatively speaking, particularly in a fiscal sense, state university, how we address these issues. Number one being fiscal means. And as we all know, research data management is a new area. It's also an area that would take a lot of efforts and fiscal means. So in this regard, we focused on internal technology funding that supports student technology initiatives. And we also utilized some of the external funding to tap into external funding and make our researchers to be aware that research data management is a crucial service that could benefit their grant-funded activities. And in addition, we started to also explore fee-based data services and a structure to generate auxiliary income to sustain the RDM efforts. The second aspect is the human resources and skill sets. In this regard, we, over 1 decade of planning this, we have adjusted a number of our existing employees' work plans and job descriptions. And then we also have leveraged resources among various different library departments. That is, in this case, the Library Digital Collection Center, the Library GIS Center, the library's IT division, we call it Library Systems, as well as other supporting units such as technical services and references. So we also focused on training and self-exploration of staff that's involved and expanding their current metadata experiences to data management. And the third aspect, a very important one, and the most challenging one really, is the IT infrastructure needed to support this effort. So in this regard, we have established a Dataverse instance within our own dPanther framework. The dPanther framework is one that supports all of our computing activity in digital arena area, as well as in our geospatial data science area. And we collaborated with FIU's Division of IT, and we built a framework that supports our research data management as well. I'll go into detailed discussion about the funding in that area as well. And in the meantime, most currently, we have leveraged the library resource budget to support ongoing data preservation efforts. So here is a very brief timeline. We started this planning document, a research survey with FIU faculty and students on 2013. In 2014, we have completed a planning document and proposal and submitted to our provost office, shared also with our sponsored research office. And in 2015 and 16, we have identified and allocated existing resources and started to work on the RDM initiative. In 2017, we are awarded 119,000 in tech fee, that is internal funding. From 2018 to 20, we started to build Dataverse, testing it, and start to grow our user community. By 2021, as the user community grows, we got another award in tech fee funding. This time is close to 300,000. And we expanded the framework for the RDN. And this year we're focusing on long-term conservation and preservation. And we are also focusing on crosswalking various different data platforms. In this case, of course, it's connecting Dataverse and Data Hub primarily. So this is a screenshot of FIU's research data management portal, and using the Harvard-based Dataverse. And currently we have biology, history, digital humanities, computer science, engineering, and health sciences as our members in this initiative. And this is another screenshot of what Dataverse at record level look like. And primarily our data team provides support in consultation and collaboration of to researchers in publishing and sharing their data. And that is in these three areas: metadata and documentation, copyright and use, and data framework. Now, next, I would like to talk about how research data management component fits into the larger picture of FIU's ongoing data services and framework. We have started research data service as soon as we established a library-based GIS center, and later on, a library digital collection center. And these data services cover various areas of data. You can call it the full circle of data use and data preparation and data analytics and data documentation and so on. And currently we have 1,800 active users from various disciplines that's listed here. And most recently, we are also establishing cloud computing environment in combination with a local computing deep-answer framework to start to tap into AI and machine learning. And soon enough, we recognize that metadata and data management is the core part that would support this more advanced data usage and computation. And here I give a list, just some sample of how our data services. This through LibGuides, something that we're very familiar with. Generally, we list all the resources of different types of data and data services, and we create and also curate tutorials and materials and showcasing and all point students to how to utilize various different aspects of data. And earlier, prior to ESRI's ArcGIS Online Hub, we have also created a geoportal incidents at FIU, and currently we're still using that to managing all of our spatial data sets. And then sooner we transitioned into the ArcGIS Online Data Hub. And most recently, we're also starting to utilize more of ArcGIS Online Data Hub and other tools to engage students to develop sort of a more community data sourcing platform. And in this platform, I give an example. Most recent Haiti earthquake, we were able to curate all the data sets relating to earthquake, having the students utilizing the existing data sets to create story maps on the Haitian earthquake and kidnapping issue. Also utilizing some of the geospatial community data sourcing tools such as Survey 123 to create, if you look at the very right-hand side, the Haitian kidnapped areas on the map, utilizing sort of text mining technique to figure out which areas these type of incidents happen most. And as we know, this particular initiative will continuously growing as the students conducting more research, as more people participating in this initiative. So in a sense, the data use has become a very dynamic and reciprocal process, that the users are also generators of new data. The next, I want to discuss how our data efforts, as well as institutional repository efforts, plays a role in an applied, funded project called Security Research Hub. This project, Library GIS Center and Digital Collection Center collaborated with FIU's Gordon Institute for Public Policy and Administration. And this project is not largely funded through by Southcom. In this project, we are aiming to create sort of a one-stop shop for all security-related research publications, data visualization tools, and computing environment, that we call it a Security Research Hub. And here, this is a screenshot for the Digital Commons stats. As you can see, since about a year ago, we have been curating content and research topics in 14 different subject areas. And we have curated over 1,000 publications and resources and reports in this area. And it has had over 12,000 downloads worldwide. And here we have also utilized the Data Hub, ESI's Data Hub, to manage and curate the research security hub's data topics. And here is a screenshot of various data topics that this particular project focuses on. In this case, we have illegal fishing, transnational organized crime, extreme events, migration, health and pandemic, violent extremism, human rights, and economic stability. The one area that we worked on most is illegal fishing. So we utilize the ArcGIS online platform, curating various content on this topic from the existing Living Atlas, which really is a international community, that draws data from the international community. So in addition, we also utilize this tool to manage our own value-added data analytics and tools onto this platform. And this is a data flow diagram that backs up this Security Research Hub. As you can see, the keyword of metadata, data sets, and data is mentioned repeatedly through this data flow diagram. And metadata and data management is really the foundation and core of this data flow diagram. And we were able to utilize the institutional repository, the BPress, directly as a data service to plug in there. And we were using the Data Hub to manage the geospatial data sets. So next, I would ask Levente to talk about a research perspective and experience.
Thank you, Jennifer. So over the next couple of slides, I will be talking about like how this infrastructure.
I have to tell you that you are going over time, so you have to make it as short as you can.
Thank you, Brenda.
All right, I'll wrap it up. So I'll be just talking about like how this infrastructure fits into my work as a researcher who's pretty much focusing on publishing. It's a good reminder that academic jobs usually have like three main components, as in research, teaching, and service. And with that being said, research is being evaluated mainly based on the quality and the quantity of publications, although there are like a lot of differences between institutions and job roles. But what it means that the dissemination of research is very important for researchers, and this is traditionally done through peer-reviewed outlets such as journal articles, books, chapters, conference proceedings, and so on. And if we go to the next slide, then we see that there's another major concept in science called reproducibility, which pretty much like fits into this this line. And it says that anyone should be able to come to the same conclusions using the same data, same methods, and so on, when trying to reproduce a scientific study. And in the computational sciences that I am in, this is even more strict because we also have the requirement that reviewers and readers should arrive at identical results when trying to reproduce my studies, which includes the figures, tables, and so on. And all this requires that I need to share my data, I need to share my codes in a way that it's easily accessible for others. And the next slide, there's like two screenshots from instructions for authors from two respected journals from our field. And what I would like to highlight is there's a shift in the publication practices these days, with increasing number of journals requiring researchers, or in other cases strongly encouraging, to share their data and code to promote reproducibility and open science. For the researcher, again, it means that we need a home for our data, and we need a home for our code so that we can easily share them with others. In the next slide, I'm just highlighting some major obstacles from a survey paper. So it's been identified that making research reproducible is very time consuming. It requires a lot of effort. So institutional infrastructure like research repositories, data portals can help offset some of this extra work. And in the next slide, what I would like to show is that having a research data portal that we have at FIU can be very beneficial over third-party, openly accessible data portals such as Zenodo, because in my opinion, an institutional repository has a face. So I can find the contact information for all the people that are responsible for putting this together. I can reach out to them. I can just get my phone, call them, or email them, so that they will be able to give me personalized help, so that I can focus more on research and less on these administrative tasks, as opposed to using a portal like Zenodo, where I only have the option to submit a faceless form for support and hoping that they would get back to me at some point. And finally, on my last slide, I would like to highlight another benefit of our institutional infrastructure, which is making my research discoverable. In this example, I had an extended abstract at a conference, which was published independently. So it was not published in a journal, in conference a book. Therefore, it did not appear on Google Scholar, which is a great tool for other researchers to find research. So what I did, I uploaded it to our digital commons, and in turn, it was picked up by Google Scholar, and then now it is discoverable for others, as opposed to uploading it to Zenodo. Again, the same example, which is not indexed by Google Scholar. So in this very case, having this FIU Digital Commons was very, very useful for me to make my research work discoverable. And I give the word back to Jennifer. Thank you.
Since we're running a bit out of time, I think a lot of these discussion points are really for later on questions and answer session as well. So I will just list them here. And overall, I think this whole effort of research data management, data services is really a role that libraries should be playing for academic institutions. And it is entirely possible and it's doable. And I will share the references used for this presentation. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Levente. Then we'll go to the third presentation, which comes from Germany, Rainer Kallenborn and Tamara Froehler. And the title is Towards a New Era of Journal Publishing, the Coalition of Open Diamond Access Publishing, COAP. Dr. Rainer Kallenborn is a trained mathematician and academic librarian. And since 2002, he is library director of the University Library of the Technical University of Munich. And many of us know him as a long-standing member of IATUR, for which he served as a treasurer for many years and president from 2013 to 2018. And Dr. Kallenborn is the founder of COAP. Tamara Froehler is a trained literary scholar and academic librarian, and since 2021 she works for Technical University of Munich University Press, the in-house publishing house of the Technical University of Munich. And here she is responsible for journal publishing. And Mrs. Froehler is coordinator of COAP and the Technical University of Munich. Så herzliches willkommen, Rainer und Tamara. Wir freuen uns auf Ihre Präsentation.
Dear colleagues and friends, hello Lars, good to have seen you again, though only briefly. Tamara and we want to thank Chuck and his team for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today about a topic which has been around for about 30 years now, namely the wish and need of researchers to have free access to scientific information without financial barriers, open access, especially diamond open access. You know the recent history of scientific journal publishing. When I started my career as a librarian, all was printed publication. In the 90s of last century came the internet and made journals accessible online. All of this based on the familiar subscription models. Even earlier than that, we had the so-called journal crisis, which still exists, but isn't called a crisis anymore as it has become normal life at universities, meaning we can't afford access to important journals anymore. Librarians and scientists developed the idea of open access, and they started a discussion that funding organizations as well as commercial publishers had to take into account henceforth. And publishers adopted open access as their own. It modified the original meaning slightly to the effect that after a phase of transformation contracts, everything will be open access indeed, which is good. And the payment will be based on a cost-by-cost principle, meaning authors, or rather authors' institutions, have to pay for publication. Financially, this is primarily merely a shift of money flow from the end to the start of publication. And furthermore, it is not affordable at all for many, as the journal price spiral is continuing as before. Declarations and initiatives have popped up since the 90s, as well as analysis of the situation, showing that the development of production costs and price increase over the years, strangely enough, had somehow become inverse to each other. Tamara and her colleagues compiled a list of current open access initiatives, and our impression is that all of them are either too regional or national or too specialized to make a difference globally for the publication, scientific publication culture. Therefore, we wanted to take up the original idea of open access by initiating and suggesting to you a global support network for scientific publishing based on university infrastructure and expertise alone. Initiative in which IATUR, if so wished, could play a major role. The working title is Coalition of Diamond Open Access Publishing, and in the remainder of this presentation, Tamara will tell you more about the idea and explain what we've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that we've heard some of the context and reason for the founding of COAP, let me introduce you now to the idea, the structure, and the current status of the initiative. The idea and mission of COAP is to build an international support network for the publication of diamond open access journals with the following key characteristics. COAP, first of all, is decentralized, meaning that COAP consists of many institutions all over the world that cooperate with each other for the common aim of promoting diamond open access journals. The resulting network is intended to build a huge support network for resource and knowledge sharing. So institution A helps institution B by providing resources or knowledge, and C helps D, etc. COAP has a strict not-for-profit policy. Since we want to reduce costs for editors, for authors, and for institutions, and change the journal publishing landscape for the better, only diamond open access is accepted in COAP. These diamond open access journals in the network have been assessed for common mandatory quality standards because COAP is also quality focused. Through joint quality standards, we ensure that only high quality content is included in COAP and that the journals are scientifically on a level with hopefully even successful commercial journals. Therefore, COAP, of course, needs the expertise of science professionals, which brings us to the next key characteristic of COAP. The support network is cooperative, meaning it's a joint venture by service institutions and scientists. There are as many scientists as infrastructure employees on all boards, so we can develop our offerings directly based on the needs of the scientists. And last but not least, COAP is comprehensive, meaning that all academic fields are welcome, and we strive for not only a national, but a global impact, since the scientific world as well is not limited to national borders. So that's the basic conceptual framework of the initiative. Probably you will ask, what does that mean in actual practice? What kind of support is there in the network? Or what does your institution gain if it becomes part of COAP? There are different levels of support within the support network. First of all, we have a common IT infrastructure that is in the heart of the initiative. This IT infrastructure is used and shared within the network, and I will present later on the specifics. We have mutual quality standards being defined in cooperation with scientists. We have a broad range of templates, for example, design templates, templates for author contracts, questionnaires for the creation and launch of journals, etc. And those templates can be used by all member institutions. And of course, we have the COAP brand itself that is to be developed to a recognizable brand standing for scientific quality and sustainable not-for-profit publishing. These levels of support you see here are continuously developed within the shared and decentralized governing bodies of COAP, and each member, of course, has also customization options. For example, when it comes to the publication software being used, or also if a journal wants to include more quality standards than proposed by the initiative, etc. As I've mentioned before, at the heart of the initiative is the shared IT infrastructure. And we think to show you how the support network works, the best idea is to go into more detail about the IT infrastructure sharing. First of all, very basically, we have a member institution that runs the IT system for publishing its own in-house journals, so the local COAP server that you see here. But this COAP institution also provides server capacity for other smaller, or it doesn't have to be a small institution, but another institution that does not have its own server. And in this way, a local network is established, bundled by the local server. When these local networks emerge globally, they create a global network of small local networks that can support each other and work towards a new positioning of diamond open access journals. These local networks are not only connected by the COAP brand, they are also in mutual exchange through shared governance structure. So that's the basic support network, or how the network functions. I will show you now more about the IT infrastructure. So the shared IT infrastructure consists of 3 layers. On the top, you see a discovery system. Currently, we use MoveFind. In the middle, we have a journal management system like Opal Journal Systems. And we have a repository as a file storage system. Currently, we use in our test system Mediatum, our repository at Technical University Munich. Each member institution or each institution that is a member of COAP either sets up its own server with these components or uses the server of another institution. However, the content of all servers can be accessed via all discovery systems. In addition, a website is set up through which the content can be found. This can be seen, for example, in our test system, which you see here. We have a very clear and very simple structure. This is the landing page. You see the logo here. You find a little bit about the initiative here, information for authors, for institutions, and so on. And we have the search slot in the middle where you can find or you can search for journals or articles. Here you see test data in our test system. You get a list of contents when you search for something, which you can access and get redirected to the full text. You can narrow down your search via these facets and have access to all the contents that are in COAP. This IT infrastructure is set up by member institutions and used by other institutions in the local network. To ensure that all discovery systems are always up to date content-wise, meaning that you find every article of every institution in every discovery system, we have a clear structure for content updates with a central storage and also a clear procedure for notification. So that's the shared IT infrastructure and how the infrastructure works. I will now proceed to how the whole initiative is being managed and organized. Since COAP has a decentralized structure, it is important to establish a clear governance structure to organize the initiative. The individual components of the governing bodies organize the communication and development processes within COAP. We have a community council, which is the representative body of all members of the coalition. For every member institution, it is comprised of 2 representatives, one of each stakeholder group. So for one stakeholder group is the scientific community, the other one is the infrastructure community. So every member institution appoints 2 representatives for the community council. The community council also elects the supervisory board, which is the supreme governing body responsible for the approval of strategic and politically relevant decisions. It consists of 12 members, 6 representatives of each stakeholder group. Since we also strive for an even regional distribution, 6 macrogeographical regions are to be represented in the supervisory board in equal parts: Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America. The executive steering board is, as the name says, the executive body for the operation and further development of the Coalition of Diamond Open Access Publishing. It is responsible for directing, for coordinating, controlling all activities in accordance with the goals of the coalition. It consists of a total of 8 members, 4 of each stakeholder group, so the scientific community and the infrastructure community. And last but not least, we have our expert committees that focus on subject areas of special interest to the coalition, for example, IT, outreach, assessment, etc. Those expert committees consist of COAP member institution staff. So that is the framework of the initiative. And now I would like to give you a brief insight into the current status of the project. Currently, we have established 6 expert committees. We have set up the IT system and have tested the IT system so far. We have gained national and international supporters. We have composed outreach material and a memorandum of understanding to organize the cooperation between all interested partners. We have developed a broad range of templates and quality criteria for journals and recommendations for contract templates that can be further used. And of course, we are now looking forward to the next steps, which emphasize especially the areas of outreach and network development. We are about to conduct interviews with scientists to evaluate their demands on COAP. We are planning a workshop with representatives of scientific societies. We are establishing the startup supervisory board, the science part and the infrastructure part as well. We have identified and we are still identifying flagship researchers as potential editors of COAP startup journals. We are revising the service description and membership obligations in our rules and procedures. We are revising and extending the available set of templates, setting up additional local COAP IT systems. We are convening the community council as well as the startup executive steering board, again, science part and infrastructure part as well. We are connecting with other initiatives where COAP can act as an umbrella project. We've already discussed this, for example, with Berlin University's publishing. And last but not least, we are also working on our global outreach, which is also one of the reasons why we are here or why we are attending the Agile conference. We would be very pleased if we caught your interest and look forward to your questions and comments. And if you're interested, we can invite you to our next workshop or network event, send you information or schedule a meeting with you. Just get in touch and contact us at either of these email addresses you see here. And we think, or we hope that together we can work towards the new era of Diamond Open Access Publishing. And we would be very pleased if you became a part of it. So thank you for your attention, and we are looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Tamara and Rainer. We have some few minutes for some quick questions. I have a lot of questions. I have one comment to the last presentation. I think open access started as an almost revolutionary movement, started by librarians against the increase in subscription prices, and especially for some monopolies. And now we are moving towards open access. The big enterprises' profit are higher than ever on APCs and read and publish contracts. So I think it's important to focus on the openness, but also, like the COAP does, focus on the ownership. Not that research journals are not only owned by the few monopolies, but also by foundations, libraries, organizations. So I think it's an important work. Do we have other comments or questions?
We do have a question from the chat. And I'll also say that you can also ask your questions directly with the networking tab, connect directly with any of the researchers. So we have from Connie Bitso saying, Jennifer Fu, how do you derive the extended data service fees? Do you have a funding model and IT business model that you can share?
Yes, we have been, since we have established GIS Center, we had a data service model. Primarily in data preparation, data processing, digitization, and typically we are gauging on the hours that we need to put in to perform this type of data productions. However, to date, our data service model on the research data management, in other words, metadata creation, this guidance, we're still in the process of trying to maturing that model. And I will ask Jill to fill in a little bit more on the fee-based model in terms of RDM. Jill?
Sure. So primarily our users are individual researchers who come to us. And so the size of their data hasn't been that large and cumbersome. And a lot of that cost has been covered by those 2 institutional technology fee grants that Jennifer talked about in the presentation. We are also working with our funded projects to make sure that they include those types of data management and preservation fees within their proposals, to make sure that they can support and continue to fund access to those larger amounts of data that we anticipate from those research projects.
Thank you. I have one small question for Jennifer and Levente. For us coming outside of USA, I think it was impressive to hear what you have been doing on data storage. And I would guess that since you're presenting here, that you're perhaps ahead of other institutions, other universities also in the US. But is storing research data always a task for the library, or is that being discussed also in the US, for instance, IT departments or research administration?
We have this is a very good question. In other words, which role should it be, IT or the library? In the past decade or so, we have been really collaborating with our sponsor research, with our division of IT, and we sort of explored which role, which division should really play. And at the very beginning, there was a sense of competition. IT says, oh, we also build a data center, and the researcher can, work on our large data platform, and they can perform this, heavy duty data processing. But during the process, eventually we get to know each other and who can do what. And we realize we're actually truly complementing each other. IT department is the one that can provide us hardware and infrastructure support, which we collaborate with them very closely. However, I think on the front end, in terms of, management expertise, our service orientation, our existing structure of creating metadata and organized data, this is really the library's role. And of course, in our sponsored research division, they also deal with federal mandate. And so they are, in a sense, also realize the important role that the library can play. So I would say from 2013 to now, we have gone through a long process. And through practice, we have established that the library should really be the leader and center of data management and data services, while IT should really be the sort of behind the scene infrastructure key supporter for this. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Then I would like to say thank you to all the presenters and to the audience.